There is a conversation happening under your lawn right now, and every plant in your yard is part of it, whether you have ever watered it or not. You have probably never thought of your yard as anything more than a collection of separate things. A tree by the fence, a hedge along the driveway, a patch of grass that needs mowing. Each one, in your mind, growing on its own, competing for the same sunlight and the same rain, entirely isolated from its neighbors by nothing more than a few feet of empty soil. That is the picture almost everyone carries in their head, and it is almost entirely wrong. Beneath the surface of your yard, in the dark, compacted soil most people never think about, there is a living network connecting nearly every plant to every other plant, a system so vast and so interconnected that researchers who study it have started calling it, only half-jokingly, the wood wide web. Through it, trees feed their own seedlings. Struggling plants receive emergency deliveries of sugar from healthier neighbors they have never touched. And when a pest begins chewing through the leaves of one shrub, a chemical warning can travel underground and reach a completely different plant across the yard before the danger ever arrives above ground. Welcome back to Among Backyard Wilds. If you are new here, subscribe, because what you are about to learn will change the way you think about every square foot of soil you have ever walked across. Today we are going underground into a network of fungal threads finer than a human hair to understand how the plants in your yard are quietly talking to each other every single day. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover is a single living organism found in an American forest so large that it may be, by a reasonable scientific measure, the biggest living thing on the surface of the earth. And it exists in exactly the same soil layer this entire video is about. Chapter 1. The network hiding in plain sight. To understand what is happening beneath your lawn, you first have to understand a partnership that most people have never heard of, formed between the roots of nearly every plant on Earth and a group of organisms called mycorrhizal fungi. A fungus, in this context, is not a mushroom sitting visibly on the surface. The mushroom, when one appears, is only the fruiting body, the fraction of the organism that pokes above ground to release spores. The actual organism lives almost entirely underground, as an enormous sprawling web of microscopic threads called hyphae, so thin that a single teaspoon of healthy forest soil can contain miles of them woven together. These hyphae grow directly into and around plant roots, forming a physical connection so intimate that researchers estimate roughly 90% of all land plant species on Earth rely on this partnership to survive. The fungus extends the reach of a plant's root system by a factor of hundreds, reaching into pockets of soil moisture and mineral nutrients the plant's own roots could never access alone. In return, the plant, which can do something the fungus cannot, capture sunlight and convert it into sugar through photosynthesis, pays the fungus in food, funneling a portion of that sugar down through its roots and into the fungal network. It is not vague symbolism to call this network a web. In many forests and gardens, a single fungal network can physically connect the roots of dozens of separate plants, sometimes of entirely different species, into one continuous underground structure, meaning that in a very literal sense, the tree in your yard and the shrub 30 feet away may be physically wired together by a living structure neither of them can see and neither of them controls alone. Chapter 2. The economy of sugar and stone. Once you understand that the network exists, the next question is, what actually moves through it? And the answer turns out to be closer to a functioning economy than most people expect. Carbon, in the form of sugar produced by photosynthesis, flows from plant to fungus, and in exchange, water and dissolved minerals, particularly phosphorus and nitrogen. The nutrients most often limiting a plant's growth flow from fungus to plant. Researchers using radioactive carbon isotopes as tracers have been able to watch this exchange happen in real time. Injecting a labeled form of carbon dioxide into the leaves of one tree, and then detecting that same carbon minutes to hours later, appearing inside the roots of a completely separate tree connected only through the shared fungal network. The trade is not always equal, and it is not always simple generosity. Some fungi in the network appear to extract more sugar from certain host plants than they return in nutrients, functioning less like a charitable partner and more like a toll collector, managing the flow of resources between multiple clients simultaneously. Other relationships tilt heavily in the plant's favor, particularly when a struggling or shaded plant is connected to a well-established network. What researchers increasingly describe, rather than a simple two-party trade, is something closer to a marketplace, an underground economy where carbon and nutrients are exchanged, hoarded, and redirected based on the relative needs and resources of every organism plugged into the same fungal grid. Chapter 3. The mother trees and the resources sent to kin. Perhaps the single most striking discovery to come out of decades of research into this network involves what happens when a large, established tree is connected to the small, struggling seedlings growing in its own shade. Forest ecologists studying old-growth stands identified what they termed mother trees, large, mature, deeply networked individuals that function as central hubs within the fungal web, connected to dozens or even hundreds of smaller plants around them. Using isotope tracing, researchers found that these older trees actively send measurable amounts of carbon through the shared fungal network toward nearby seedlings, particularly seedlings that are shaded, struggling, or under environmental stress, effectively subsidizing the survival of the next generation of trees using resources the older tree itself worked to produce. More strikingly, some of that research suggests these transfers occur preferentially toward the mother tree's own offspring, detected through genetic relatedness when compared to unrelated seedlings of the same species nearby, hinting at something researchers approach carefully but cannot entirely dismiss: a form of biological kin recognition operating through a network with no brain, no nervous system, and no conscious decision-making capacity of any kind that science has ever identified. Whether or not the word intention belongs anywhere near this process remains genuinely debated among scientists. What is not debated is the outcome. Seedlings connected to an established mycorrhizal network measurably survive at higher rates than seedlings artificially cut off from it, and in some studied forests, when a mature tree is removed, the surrounding smaller plants that were connected to it through the fungal web show a measurable decline in health in the following seasons, a kind of quiet, delayed consequence rippling outward through a structure the loggers cutting the tree down could not see and were never required to consider. Chapter 4. The warning that travels underground before it ever reaches the leaves. If the network only carried food, it would already be remarkable. What makes it stranger still is that it also appears to carry information, specifically warnings. When a plant is attacked by an insect, chewed by an aphid infestation, or invaded by a fungal pathogen, it produces defensive chemical compounds, some released into the air, and researchers studying underground signaling found something else entirely: that plants connected to an attacked individual through a shared mycorrhizal network began producing their own defensive compounds, elevating their chemical defenses before the pest or pathogen ever physically reached them. In controlled experiments, researchers exposed one plant to aphids while physically blocking any airborne signal from reaching a neighboring plant, leaving the underground fungal connection as the only possible pathway between them. The neighboring plant still ramped up its defenses. Something had traveled through the soil, through the fungal threads, carrying a warning that could not be explained by scent or sound. The exact mechanism, whether the signal is a direct chemical compound passed through the fungal hyphae themselves, or an electrical-like impulse, or some combination not yet fully mapped, remains an active area of research, but the functional result has been replicated across multiple studies and multiple plant species. A shrub in your yard being attacked by insects on one side of your property may, through a connection you will never see, be quietly raising the alarm for a plant on the completely opposite side of your garden, hours before that second plant is ever touched. Chapter 5. The network is not always generous. It would be tempting at this point to imagine the fungal network beneath your lawn as some kind of purely cooperative underground utopia, every plant helping every other plant. The reality is considerably more complicated and in some cases considerably darker. Certain plants have evolved to exploit the network rather than trade fairly within it. A small group of plants, most having lost the ability to photosynthesize entirely, tap directly into the fungal web and simply steal carbon from it without ever producing any sugar of their own to offer in return, a strategy researchers call mycorrhizal, essentially parasitizing the entire underground economy by posing as a normal partner while contributing nothing. Other plants take an even more aggressive approach, releasing chemical compounds directly into the shared soil and fungal network, specifically to suppress or poison the growth of competing plants nearby, a strategy called allelopathy. The black walnut tree is the most well-documented backyard example, releasing a compound called juglone into the surrounding soil that inhibits the growth of many other plant species within its root zone, effectively using the same underground pathways that carry cooperative signals elsewhere, to instead wage a slow chemical campaign against its neighbors. The network beneath your yard, in other words, is not simply a peaceful cooperative. It is closer to a functioning society, complete with trade, mutual aid, freeloaders, and outright chemical warfare, all happening in total darkness, entirely out of sight. Every single day. Chapter 6, The Scale Shift, from your lawn to the largest known living organism on Earth. Everything described so far happens at the scale of a backyard, a handful of connected root systems beneath a single property. But there is one more layer to this story, and it expands the scale of everything you have just learned to something almost impossible to picture. In the Blue Mountains of eastern Oregon, researchers investigating a large area of dying trees trace the damage back to a single fungus, Armillaria ostoyi, a species that spreads underground using the same kind of thread-like hyphae found in ordinary mycorrhizal networks, except in this case operating as a parasite that slowly kills the trees whose roots it infiltrates. Using genetic sampling taken across a wide area of forest, researchers confirmed that the fungal tissue found at sampling points separated by more than 2 miles belonged to a single, genetically identical organism, one continuous individual, estimated by researchers to cover roughly 2,200 acres of forest floor, an area larger than 1,600 football fields. Based on its size and known growth rate, researchers estimated the organism to be somewhere between 2,000 and 8,000 years old, meaning a single connected living structure that may have been quietly spreading through the soil since before the construction of the Egyptian pyramids, still growing, still spreading entirely underground, largely invisible except for occasional clusters of honey-colored mushrooms that surface briefly in autumn before disappearing again. It is, by total mass and by the strict biological definition of a single organism, one of the most serious contenders for the largest living thing ever documented on the surface of the Earth, and it exists using the exact same underground fungal architecture on a vastly larger scale that connects the ordinary plants growing in your own backyard. The conclusion, what the crack of soil beneath your feet was actually hiding. The next time you walk across your lawn, past the tree by the fence, past the hedge along the driveway, you will not see them the same way again. What looks like a collection of separate plants, each competing quietly for its own patch of sunlight, is very likely a single connected structure, trading sugar for water, sending warnings ahead of danger, occasionally subsidizing a struggling seedling through resources funneled from an older, established neighbor, all of it running through threads finer than a human hair. Buried in soil, Most people will spend their entire lives walking across without a single thought. Somewhere in a forest in Oregon, a fungus older than most human civilizations continues to spread. One connected organism larger than most towns, using exactly the same biological toolkit quietly at work beneath your own lawn tonight. You have been standing on top of a conversation your entire life. Now you know it was happening. Tell me in the comments, do you have a tree or plant in your yard that seems to thrive no matter what? Or one nearby that always seems to struggle despite getting the same sun and water as everything around it? I want to hear about it. I read every one. I will see you in the next one.